Imagine you are the commander of a Chinese carrier strike group. You are standing on the flag bridge of the Fujian, the crown jewel of the People's Liberation Army Navy. It is an 80,000-ton catapult-equipped supercarrier, flanked by a massive, formidable escort of Type 055 high-class cruisers, Type 052D destroyers, and submerged Type 093 nuclear attack submarines. You possess the firepower to level a small nation. Your mission is to project overwhelming, uncontested power into the deep, dark waters of the Philippine Sea, to deter the United States Navy from intervening in a regional conflict, and to secure the eastern flank of the Chinese mainland. But as your massive armada churns through the shallow, congested waters of the East China Sea, heading southeast toward the open Pacific, a cold, paralyzing realization settles over the Combat Information Center. You are not sailing into the open ocean. You are sailing into a cage. And the door is rapidly slamming shut. To reach the deep water, your massive, highly visible, multi-billion-dollar fleet must transit through the first island chain. You look at the navigational charts, searching for a pathway. The gaps between the islands are narrow, treacherous, and shallow. The only viable, wide-open corridor capable of accommodating a fleet of this magnitude is the Miyako Strait. But the Miyako Strait is not an international superhighway. It is a 250-kilometer wide kill zone. To your left is the Japanese island of Okinawa. To your right is the Japanese island of Miyako. And straight ahead, hidden in the dense tropical jungle canopies of these remote outposts, are dozens of road-mobile, highly camouflaged transporter erector launchers belonging to the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force. The moment your carrier strike group enters the strait, you are illuminated by a massive, overlapping web of active phased array radars. The radar warning receivers on your destroyers begin to shriek. You are locked on from the north, from the south, and from the east. You realize with terrifying clarity that the Japanese military is no longer a passive, pacifist defense force. They have weaponized the very geography of the ocean. Before your aircraft carrier can even launch a single fighter jet, your fleet is targeted by hundreds of stealthy, sea-skimming, 1,000-kilometer range cruise missiles designed to break the keels of your cruisers and turn your flight decks into burning, twisted slag. You have built the largest navy on the face of the earth, but you cannot leave your own front yard. This is not a hypothetical war game from a decade ago. This is the kinetic, heavily armed reality of the Indo-Pacific today. The sleeping giant of Asia has awoken, and Japan has officially assumed its new ruthless role. They are the warden of the first island chain. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are executing a deep-dive forensic analysis into the most massive, geographically devastating military trap on the planet, the Ryukyu Wall. Here is the thesis for this episode. In the 21st century, you do not need to build 1,000 ships to defeat 1,000 ships. You simply need to own the choke points. A blue water navy is completely, mathematically useless if it is permanently trapped in a brown water prison. If you are beginning to understand why the true balance of global power is not decided by the sheer tonnage of a naval fleet, but by the relentless, unsentimental mathematics of archipelagic geography, long-range precision strike weapons, and asymmetric kill zones, hit that like button and subscribe to Doctrine of War. We strip away the diplomatic rhetoric to bring you the cold, hard, kinetic realities of how the free world actually builds, fights, and deters. Your support ensures we can keep delivering this level of uncompromising strategic analysis. For the last 20 years, the Western defense establishment has been paralyzed by the fear of China's anti-access/area denial, A2/AD, missile bubbles. We watched Beijing build artificial islands in the South China Sea and deploy thousands of ballistic missiles, convinced they had created an impenetrable fortress. But while the West was panicking, Japan was quietly, methodically building a fortress of its own. A fortress that is infinitely larger, naturally fortified, and vastly more lethal. We are going to break down the geography of the trap, why the Miyako Strait is the absolute, unavoidable jugular vein of the Chinese Navy, and how Japan has locked it down. We are going to explore the 1,000-kilometer spear, the historic, unprecedented upgrade of the Type 12 surface-to-ship missile, and why it represents the violent death of Japanese pacifism. We will analyze the archipelagic defense doctrine, the brutal shoot-and-scoot tactics that make Japanese missile batteries virtually impossible for the PLA rocket force to destroy. And finally, we will look at the death of the Blue Water Dream. Why China's global ambitions die the moment they hit the Ryukyu Wall. Let us begin by looking at the map, and why the sheer, unyielding reality of plate tectonics is the ultimate enemy of the Chinese Communist Party. The prison of the first island chain. To understand the absolute, strategic panic gripping the admirals of the People's Liberation Army Navy plan, you must first strip away the propaganda of their shipbuilding numbers and look exclusively at the unforgiving realities of maritime geography. China is a massive continent-spanning superpower. But geopolitically and specifically navally, it is a deeply claustrophobic, imprisoned nation. When a Chinese warship leaves its port in Shanghai, Ningbo, or Qingdao, it sails into the East China Sea or the Yellow Sea. These bodies of water are incredibly shallow, heavily congested with civilian commercial traffic, and constantly monitored by a dense, overlapping network of allied radar, sonar, and satellite surveillance. In naval terms, this is brown water or green water. It is an incredibly dangerous place for a major surface fleet to operate during a high-intensity conflict, and it is an absolute death trap for a nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine, SSBN. Submarines rely on the immense depth, the complex thermal layers, and the vast acoustic emptiness of the deep ocean to hide. If a Chinese Type 094 nuclear submarine tries to hide in the shallow mud of the East China Sea, it will be hunted down and destroyed by Japanese P-1 patrol aircraft and American Virginia-class attack subs in a matter of hours. To survive, to launch strikes against the American homeland, or to project power to outflank the island of Taiwan, the Chinese fleet must reach the deep, open waters of the Pacific Ocean. They must reach the Philippine Sea. But standing directly between the Chinese coastline and the open Pacific is a massive, unbroken, 1,200-kilometer-long geological barrier. This is the Nansei Island chain, commonly known in the West as the Ryukyu Islands. It is an archipelago of over 100 islands stretching in a long, continuous crescent from the southernmost tip of the Japanese main island of Kyushu, all the way down to Yonaguni Island, which sits a mere 110 kilometers off the eastern coast of Taiwan. This island chain forms the northern half of the first island chain strategy, a concept originally envisioned by American strategists like John Foster Dulles during the Cold War. But today, the first island chain is no longer an American concept. It is a sovereign, heavily armed Japanese reality, the Miyako Strait chokepoint. If the Chinese fleet wants to break out of its shallow water prison, it cannot simply sail over the islands. It must find a gap. It must thread the needle. When you look at the navigational charts of the Ryukyu archipelago, the gaps between the islands are mostly narrow, treacherous, and easily mined. The Osumi Strait in the north is tight. The Tokara Strait is constrained. There is only one truly viable, wide-open, deep-water corridor capable of safely accommodating the massive, sprawling footprint of a modern carrier strike group or a submerged fleet of nuclear submarines without forcing them into a dangerously predictable, single-file line. That corridor is the Miyako Strait. Located roughly in the center of the Ryukyu chain, the Miyako Strait is a body of water approximately 250 kilometers wide. It separates the major Japanese island of Okinawa to the north, and the smaller Japanese island of Miyako to the south. In peacetime, the Miyako Strait is classified as an international waterway. Chinese naval flotillas frequently sail through it, boldly conducting transit exercises to demonstrate their blue water capabilities and to flex their muscles for the domestic audience back in Beijing. But in wartime, the Miyako Strait ceases to be a waterway. It becomes a 250-kilometer wide, inescapable kill zone. Because Japan controls the sovereign landmass on both the northern and southern flanks of this critical artery, they have the ultimate geographic high ground. The Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force, JGSDF, doesn't need to deploy a fleet of expensive, vulnerable destroyers into the strait to block the Chinese Navy. They simply have to fortify the islands on either side. By placing radar stations, electronic warfare jamming arrays, and anti-ship missile batteries on Okinawa and Miyakojima, Japan effectively creates a massive, overlapping, interlocking dome of lethality. Every single square meter of the Miyako Strait is covered by multiple, redundant firing arcs. There is no blind spot. There is no stealthy route. If a Chinese warship enters the strait, it is instantly illuminated by Japanese radar. It is painted. It is tracked. And it is mathematically guaranteed to be engaged from multiple vectors simultaneously. By holding the keys to the Miyako Strait, Japan effectively holds the leash to the entire Chinese Navy. And for decades, the only thing preventing Japan from fully locking the gate was its own internal, pacifist political restraints. But as of the mid-2020s, those restraints have been violently, permanently discarded. The death of the 200 kilometers limit. To understand the absolute panic that the militarization of the Ryukyu Islands is causing in Beijing, you must understand the historic, unprecedented shift in Japanese military hardware that has occurred over the last 5 years. Since the end of the Second World War, the Japanese military operated under the strict, self-imposed constraints of Article 9 of their pacifist constitution. The Japanese self-defense forces were legally bound to an exclusively defensive posture. They were permitted to possess weapons that could protect the Japanese homeland from direct, immediate invasion, but they were strictly forbidden from possessing offensive weapons, weapons capable of striking an enemy's homeland or projecting power across vast distances. In the realm of coastal defense, this meant that the Japanese ground self-defense force relied on systems like the Type 88 and the baseline Type 12 surface-to-ship missile, SSM. The baseline Type 12, manufactured by Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, MHI, was an exquisite, highly capable piece of engineering. It was a truck-mounted, subsonic anti-ship missile featuring advanced terrain contour matching, GPS guidance, and an active radar seeker. But, adhering to the pacifist limits, its operational range was intentionally handicapped. It could only fly roughly 200 kilometers. A 200-kilometer range is perfect for shooting a ship that is trying to land troops on a Japanese beach. But it is completely useless for deterring a modern, industrialized superpower that can launch cruise missiles from destroyers 500 kilometers away. As the Chinese Navy expanded, and as the People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, PLARF, deployed thousands of ballistic missiles capable of striking Tokyo, the strategic planners in the Japanese Ministry of Defense realized that a purely defensive short-range posture was a suicide pact. You cannot win a boxing match if your arms are only a foot long and your opponent is holding a sniper rifle. The Japanese government made a monumental, historic decision. They authorized the counter-strike capability. They shattered the 200-kilometer limit, the 1,000 kilometers apex predator. The Japanese Ministry of Defense ordered Mitsubishi Heavy Industries to take the proven, reliable baseline of the Type 12 missile and fundamentally, radically evolve it into a long-range, offensive apex predator. The resulting weapon, the upgraded Type 12, is no longer just a coastal defense rocket. It is a strategic, long-range, stealthy cruise missile. The physical dimensions of the missile were enlarged. The standard rocket motor was replaced with an advanced, highly efficient turbofan engine, drastically increasing its fuel capacity and flight endurance. The aerodynamic profile was completely redesigned, incorporating aggressive stealth shaping, radar-absorbent materials, and a sleek, low-observable airframe to drastically reduce its radar cross-section, RCS, against Chinese air defense networks. But the most terrifying, paradigm-shifting upgrade is the range. The upgraded Type 12 boasts an operational range that has been extended from 200 kilometers to a staggering 1,000 kilometers, with further development currently underway to push that envelope to 1,500 kilometers. Furthermore, the new Type 12 is no longer just an anti-ship missile. It has been equipped with advanced, multi-mode seeker heads and two-way data links, giving it a devastating land attack capability. Let us overlay this new 1,000-kilometer spear onto the map of the Ryukyu Islands, and witness the geometric nightmare it creates for Beijing. Previously, a Japanese missile battery on the remote island of Miyako could only defend the immediate waters of the Miyako Strait. Today, a battery of upgraded Type 12 stationed on Miyakojima doesn't just cover the strait. A 1,000-kilometer threat ring stretches deep across the East China Sea. It covers the entire northern half of the island of Taiwan. It reaches across the ocean and easily encompasses the major Chinese naval bases and coastal command centers in Zhejiang and Fujian provinces on the Chinese mainland. And it gets worse for China. Japan has actively deployed these missile batteries even further south, to the tiny remote islands of Ishigaki and Yonaguni. Yonaguni Island is the westernmost point of Japan. It is incredibly isolated, sitting just 110 kilometers off the eastern coast of Taiwan. By heavily fortifying Yonaguni with 1,000-kilometer range stealth cruise missiles, Japan has effectively parked a massive, unsinkable, heavily armed battleship right on China's doorstep. From Yonaguni, the Japanese threat ring completely swallows the entire Taiwan Strait. It covers the Chinese invasion staging areas in Xiamen and Fuzhou. Japan doesn't even need to sail a single destroyer out of port to absolutely devastate a Chinese amphibious invasion fleet attempting to cross the Taiwan Strait. They can sit safely on the sovereign dirt of the Ryukyu Islands, hundreds of kilometers away, and ripple-fire hundreds of stealthy, sea-skimming cruise missiles directly into the flank of the Chinese armada. By upgrading the Type 12, Japan didn't just build a better missile. They built a 1,000-kilometer spear that rests permanently against the throat of the Chinese Navy. The brutal mathematics of survival. Having a 1,000-kilometer range stealth missile is a massive strategic advantage, but it introduces a critical, terrifying vulnerability. The moment Beijing realizes that the tiny islands of the Ryukyu chain are packed with long-range ship killers, those islands instantly become Tier 1 high-priority targets for the Chinese rocket force. In the event of a high-intensity conflict over Taiwan or the East China Sea, the Chinese military doctrine is clear. Execute a massive, overwhelming, preemptive saturation strike. The PLA would rain hundreds of short-range ballistic missiles, SRBMs, like the DF-16 and DF-15, as well as land attack cruise missiles, directly onto the Japanese bases in Okinawa, Miyako, Ishigaki, and Yonaguni. If the Japanese ground self-defense force built massive static concrete bunkers to house their Type 12 missiles, they would be fighting a losing battle. A static bunker is a fixed GPS coordinate. No matter how much concrete you pour, a modern bunker-busting ballistic missile will eventually penetrate it and vaporize the assets inside. To survive the initial, inevitable Chinese bombardment, the Japanese military had to adopt the doctrine of ruthless, asymmetric mobility. They adopted the shoot-and-scoot doctrine, the ghosts of the jungle. This is why the architecture of the Type 12 missile system is so brilliantly suited for archipelagic defense. The upgraded Type 12 is not launched from a silo. It is mounted on a heavy, highly mobile 8x8 transporter erector launcher, TEL, truck. These TL trucks are the ultimate ghosts of the battlefield. Let us wargame the Japanese archipelagic defense strategy in real time. Tensions have peaked. Intelligence indicates a Chinese naval breakout is imminent. The Japanese commanders on Ishigaki and Miyako do not park their TELs on the open tarmac of the local airport. They disperse. The islands of the Ryukyu chain are heavily forested, covered in dense, subtropical jungle canopies, deep valleys and rugged, mountainous terrain. They are also populated with civilian infrastructure, warehouses, commercial garages and highway tunnels. The Japanese missile batteries drive off the military bases and disappear into the terrain. They hide under heavy, radar-scattering camouflage netting deep in the jungle. They park inside reinforced civilian tunnels. They utilize the natural topography of the islands to break the line of sight of Chinese surveillance satellites and high-altitude drones. They sit in the dark, maintaining absolute radio silence, emitting zero electromagnetic signatures. They are completely invisible to the Chinese targeting matrix. Meanwhile, high above the Pacific, the Japanese kill web is watching. A Japanese E-767 airborne warning and control system, AWACS, aircraft, or a stealthy F-35A Lightning II flying passively over the Philippine Sea, detects the massive Chinese carrier strike group attempting to push through the Miyako Strait. The F-35 pilot does not engage. The aircraft acts as an invisible, omniscient forward observer. It beams the precise, fire control quality tracking data via highly secure, jam-resistant data links down to the Japanese command centers, which instantly relay the coordinates to the hidden TEL trucks on the islands. The 3-minute kill chain. The moment the kill order is received, the ghosts come alive. The Japanese TL trucks roar out of their hiding spots in the jungle or the tunnels. They drive to pre-surveyed, temporary launch points, perhaps a clearing in the trees, a stretch of coastal highway or a deserted beach. The truck stops. The massive launch canisters elevate. In a matter of seconds, the battery ripple fires a devastating salvo of 6 upgraded Type 12 cruise missiles. The missiles erupt from the canisters in a blaze of solid rocket exhaust, immediately dropping down to skim just meters above the wave tops, navigating autonomously toward the Chinese fleet 800 kilometers away. But the Japanese crew does not stay to watch the fireworks. In modern warfare, the moment a missile leaves the launch tube, the massive thermal plume and the radar signature of the outgoing projectile immediately alert the enemy's counter-battery radar systems. The Chinese sensors instantly calculate the point of origin and relay those GPS coordinates to a waiting ballistic missile battery on the mainland. A retaliatory strike is inbound within minutes. But the Japanese shoot-and-scoot doctrine is built for this exact reality. The moment the last Type 12 leaves the tube, the TEL truck lowers its canisters, the driver floors the accelerator, and the massive vehicle aggressively relocates. Within 3 minutes of firing, the Japanese missile truck is 5 kilometers away, pulling back under the jungle canopy or into a different tunnel complex, blending perfectly back into the background noise of the island. 20 minutes later, the Chinese retaliatory ballistic missile arrives, slamming into the launch coordinates with earth-shattering force. But all it hits is empty dirt and scorched grass. The Japanese TL is already reloading its canisters from a dispersed ammunition cache, preparing to launch its second devastating volley at the Chinese fleet. This is the absolute nightmare of archipelagic defense. By utilizing highly mobile, easily concealable trucks, Japan forces China to play an impossible game of whack-a-mole across an entire island chain. China must expend billions of dollars of scarce, highly valuable ballistic missiles attempting to blindly hit cheap trucks hiding in the jungle. And while the Chinese rocket force is wasting its ammunition bombing empty dirt, the Japanese Type 12 missiles are systematically dismembering the Chinese Navy in the straits below. The death of the Blue Water Dream. To truly grasp the geopolitical devastation that the Ryukyu Wall inflicts upon the Chinese Communist Party, you must look at the grand strategic ambitions of Xi Jinping. For 2 decades, China has poured trillions of dollars into a singular, obsessive goal: transitioning the People's Liberation Army Navy from a coastal defense force into a true global blue water navy. They want to be able to project power into the Indian Ocean to secure their energy imports. They want to sail carrier strike groups to the coast of Africa. They want to directly threaten the American homeland with submerged nuclear ballistic missile submarines, SSBNs, operating in the deep Pacific. They built the Type 003 Fujian supercarrier. They built massive Type 055 cruisers. They built a fleet that, on paper, rivals the tonnage of the United States Navy. But the Ryukyu Wall renders that entire multi-trillion-dollar investment functionally, mathematically useless. A blue water navy is only a blue water navy if it can actually reach the blue water. If you build 3 massive aircraft carriers, but you cannot safely sail them out of the East China Sea without having them sunk by Japanese missiles launched from a truck in the jungle, you do not have a global navy. You have the world's most expensive, heavily armed coastal defense force. By heavily fortifying the 1,200-kilometer Nansei island chain, Japan has essentially thrown a massive, unbreakable net over the entire eastern seaboard of China. If the Chinese fleet stays inside the first island chain, they are trapped in a claustrophobic, shallow water cage, surrounded by hostile democracies, unable to project power globally. If the Chinese fleet attempts to break out of the cage, they must funnel their massive high-value ships through the narrow choke points of the Miyako Strait, the Asymmetric Strait, or the Bashi Channel. They are forced to fight a grueling, bloody, catastrophic war of attrition just to reach the starting line of the open Pacific Ocean. The Warden of the Pacific. This is the ultimate strategic triumph of the Japanese rearmament. For years, the United States bore the sole burden of containing Chinese naval expansion in the Pacific. The U.S. Navy relied heavily on forward-deployed carrier strike groups and the massive bases in Guam and Hawaii. But the Ryukyu Wall represents a fundamental shift in the burden of deterrence. The United States no longer has to fight China alone in the East China Sea. Japan has stepped up to the plate. By weaponizing its own geography, Japan has assumed the role of the warden. They have created a permanent, unsinkable, heavily armed barricade. The Japanese self-defense forces do not need to build a fleet of aircraft carriers to match the Chinese Navy. They simply have to sit on their islands, load their Type 12 missiles, and dare the Chinese fleet to run the gauntlet. The cost-exchange ratio is spectacularly asymmetric. A single, upgraded Type 12 cruise missile costs a few $1,000,000. A Chinese Type 055 cruiser costs over $1 billion and carries hundreds of highly trained sailors. Japan can afford to ripple-fire 10, 20, or 50 missiles to overwhelm the defenses of a single Chinese ship. China cannot afford to lose $1 billion cruiser to a truck parked on a beach in Yonaguni. The Ryukyu Wall forces Beijing to confront a deeply uncomfortable, paralyzing reality. The strategic initiative in the Western Pacific no longer belongs exclusively to China. The element of surprise has been revoked. If Beijing wants to initiate a blockade of Taiwan, or project power into the Philippine Sea, they can no longer assume that the Japanese islands are passive, neutral speed bumps. They must factor in the absolute certainty that the moment their ships leave port, they will be tracked, targeted, and relentlessly pounded by the most advanced, lethal, and survivable archipelagic defense network on the planet. The era of Japanese pacifism is officially, irrevocably dead. For 75 years, the world grew accustomed to a Japan that was wealthy, technologically brilliant, but militarily neutered. The Chinese Communist Party banked their entire grand strategy on the assumption that this pacifism was a permanent, unbreakable feature of the geopolitical landscape. They assumed they could expand their naval empire without resistance from their most powerful neighbor. The Ryukyu Wall is the monumental 1,200-kilometer-long proof that Beijing's assumption was a catastrophic miscalculation. Driven by the relentless, aggressive militarization of the Chinese military, the sleeping giant of Asia has awoken. Japan has fundamentally rewritten its security doctrines. They have broken the 200-kilometer limit. They have embraced the 1,000-kilometer spear. And they have deployed those spears to the very edges of their sovereign territory, staring directly down the throat of the Chinese mainland. The Miyako Strait is no longer a pathway to global power, it is a meticulously designed death trap. The remote jungles of Yanaguni and Ishigaki are no longer quiet tropical islands. They are heavily armed, unsinkable battleships hiding in the foliage. Japan has locked the gate to the Pacific Ocean. They have fortified the walls, loaded the magazines, and assumed their position as the warden of the first island chain. And for the admirals of the Chinese Navy, looking out at the impenetrable, overlapping missile arcs blocking their path to the open ocean, the realization is absolute and terrifying. The blue water dream is over. The cage is locked. And Japan holds the key. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you believe that Japan's archipelagic defense doctrine and land-based missiles are enough to completely bottleneck the Chinese Navy, or will Beijing find a way to break through the Ryukyu Wall? Let us know your tactical assessment in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay relentless, and we'll see you in the next one.